Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Landau, Director of NYU's Creative Writing Program. We are delighted to be presenting Claudia Rankine in conversation with Terrance Hayes tonight. There are many things to celebrate tonight, one of which is the imminent arrival of Professor. What, is there a problem?
No, go ahead.
Okay. There are many things to celebrate tonight, one of which is the imminent arrival of Professor Claudia Rankine to the NYU Creative Writing Program. She'll be teaching at NYU beginning next year, and we are overjoyed. Tonight is an opportunity to celebrate her, to welcome her to our community. The format of the evening is that Terrance will introduce Claudia, she'll read, they'll talk and take your questions. I'm going to turn the evening over to Terrance Hayes, who, as you know, is one of our most celebrated and important and innovative poets. He's a MacArthur Fellow, recipient of a National Book Award, among other major honors. He's the author most recently of American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. He is a beloved professor at NYU where he teaches our poets. Please welcome Terrance Hayes.
Oh, Terrance, I don't think we can hear you.
Uh-oh, that might be a problem.
Now we can hear you.
But am I echoing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, how do I fix that? So you only hear the echo. Okay, hold on one second. How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. You guys can hear a little bit. All right, well, cool. Yeah, we're just finishing class. We're gonna get into this great conversation with you. I guess I should read your bio. I mean, everybody should know who you are, the great Claudia Rankine, but let me read this and then we're gonna be on our way so we can enjoy the evening. Claudia Rankine is the author of 6 collections of poetry and essays, including Just Us, An American Conversation, Citizen, An American Lyric. I'm trying to help y'all out, people out there trying to figure out what's going on here. Just Us is the newest book, American Conversation, You Know Citizen, An American Lyric, and Don't Let Me Be Lonely, also an American Lyric. 3 plays, including Help, which premiered in March of 2020 at the Shed, NYC. The White Card, which premiered in February and was published by Graywolf in 2019, as well as numerous video collaborations. She is also the co-editor of several anthologies, including The Racial Imaginary, Writers on Race and the Life of the Mind. And in 2016, she co-founded the Racial Imaginary Institute. Among her numerous awards and honors, Rankine is the recipient of the Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry, the Poets and Writers Jackson Poetry Prize, fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lannan Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the United States Artists, and the National Endowment of the Arts. A former Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Claudia Rankine will join us, the NYU Creative Writing Program, as a professor in the fall of 2021. So welcome, Claudia. You and I are going to do something else. I don't know, can you plug other stuff? You and I are going to do something else in about a week. And I guess it'll be a different sort of thing. So I'm trying, as I imagine this, just it's why I was so excited to have our brilliant students here, is just, talk about whatever you want to talk about, but also keep it from being redundant when we come back together again in a little while. So I don't know what you got planned for us. I think you said you had a clip or something too.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Terrance. Hello, Deborah. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be in your company, even through Zoom. And also, we're in one of the most important weeks of our lifetime. And it's a very exciting week. I'm looking forward to the final announcement of Biden-Harris as president and vice president-elect. So I am in a really good mood, actually, because of that. So I thought, actually, Terrance, I thought what I would do is do a reading for maybe 20, 25 minutes, maybe show a video in there, and then we could talk. How's that?
Sounds great. Sounds great.
All right, okay. All right, so I'm gonna start by sharing my screen with you all.
Are you able to do that? Okay, great.
Yeah, there we are. So I think what I want to start out by talking about the cover image on Just Us, because I really feel in debt to Nona Fastine, the artist, photographer who did this cover. I really wanted to use it because of the reflecting pool. Because in many ways, Just Us is about, to use Faneau's phrase, reciprocal recognitions. You know, to both of us to be in relation with each other as interdependent conversants. And so I thought this was the perfect cover for this reason. If you notice, there's that black line going across there. And that is because when she did the first photograph, it made a mistake and this black cloud appeared in the development process. And then she decided to keep it because in a way it spoke back to anti-Blackness. And so she went on to do other photographs of national monuments with that black cloud coming across it. So that's how the cover got to be the cover. The epigraph in the book is engaged by a lot of people. I named Just Us before I knew about this clip by Richard Pryor, but the artist Alexandra Bell pointed me to it. And so I included it partly because when Pryor talks about Just Us, the implication is that it's Black people. But I also like that the line could also mean white people, that you go down there looking for justice and you only find Just Us. So Just Us could be justice is only for white people, just us. Or you go down where justice should occur and you only find Black people. But here's the clip.
I went to jail for income tax evasion, right? You know, I didn't know a motherfucking thing about no taxes. I told the judge, said, Your Honor, I forgot. You know, he said, you remember next year, nigga. Start writing on your ass. They give niggas time like it's lunch down there. You go down there looking for justice. That's what you find, just us.
So I'm gonna start by reading two sections from the first poem. What does it mean to want an age-old call for change, not to change, and yet also to feel bullied by the call to change? How is a call to change named shame, named penance, named chastisement? How does one say, what if, without reproach? The root of chastise is to make pure, the impossibility of that. Is that what repels and not the call for change? And that, the final section of that poem. What if? What I want from you is new, newly made, a new sentence in response to all my questions, a swerve in our relation with the words that carry us, the care that carries. I am here without the shrug, attempting to understand how what I want and what I want from you run parallel. Justice and the openings for just us. So Just Us is a book that really becomes a kind of diagnostic of conversations themselves. And the very first conversation in the book is the only one that in a way is not an intimate conversation. I was teaching a class called Constructions of Whiteness, and many of my students were interviewing their family members about how whiteness functioned in their family and in their lives. And, you know, they would interview family members, they would interview suite mates, they would interview people in the college at large. And so I thought, well, I could do that. I could interview some people. And it was pre-quarantine, so I was traveling quite a lot. And the only time I found myself free in kind of liminal space, neither here nor there, in a kind of marginal existence, is at airports. And so I thought, oh, I'll talk to white men in airports about their privilege, about their mobility in this society, and their perception of how it is they get to be in charge, because apparently they're in charge. And so the first essay of a conversation is really an essay of the journey to having those conversations. And inside that essay, there's a photo of a Sally card. And I, you know, in the classroom, I thought a lot about what are the ways in which our ordinary culture has perpetuated ideas of the centralizing of whiteness. And the Sally card is one of those. So I want to show you a little tiny film here.
This is a Shirley card.
Shirley card.
And if you developed color film between the 1940s and the 1990s, the accuracy of the colors in your photos were pretty much based on this skin tone.
Shirley was probably the name of the first person who was pictured on the card, and Shirley became the subsequent name of all the women pictured on the card.
That's Lorna Roth, a professor and researcher at Concordia University in Montreal.
Usually they were white women who wore very colorful dresses.
Color film works like this. There are layers of chemicals stacked on each other that are sensitive to different colors of lights. And there are a series of different types of chemical solutions that are used to develop them once exposed to that light. A combination of all of these chemicals creates a film's color balance. And for many decades, chemicals that would bring out various reddish, yellow, and brown tones were largely left out.
The consumer market that was designated in the design of film chemistry was that of the lighter skinned market. So when it came to defining what an idealized international skin tone would be, it turned out to be a lighter skin tone than a darker skin tone. If you're shooting people with lighter skins, it looks good. If you're shooting people with darker skins, it doesn't look so good. If you're shooting mixed race in the same screen, then we see the real problems.
It wasn't until the 1970s where things started to change, and it came from a very unlikely source.
Companies that were advertising different kinds of wood furniture were complaining that Kodak film did not render the difference between dark grained wood and light grained wood.
The other companies that Kodak responded to were chocolate makers, because the film couldn't render the difference between dark chocolate and milk chocolate. As the film and television industries became more diverse, color balance issues at the professional level became even more.
These things freeze sometimes in these PowerPoints. You might have to click on it to play again. Did it get stuck?
Oh, okay. Whoops.
Sometimes you have to push play. It's something about the connection between those, you know, the PowerPoint keynote through Zoom.
Oh, okay, now it's completely disappeared. But that's okay. You got the idea about the Shirley cards. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of this book is, as well as looking at how conversations work between people, I also wanted to keep the idea of the erasure of people of color as part of the structure of the book. And given that, this is where the PowerPoint would be helpful if I could get it back. Given that the form of erasure is something that shows up in the book repeatedly in the form of, I took Notes from Virginia, the Jefferson text, and took out the sections where Jefferson really went in on the inhumanity or the lack of humanness for Black people, our lack of intelligence, our ability not to grieve, our ability to work hard. You know, so that language came forward by using the erasure. There are other poetry books like Philip's Zong, Jen Berwin's Nets that are in that tradition as well. There's also a Hank Willis Thomas, All Lives Matter, which becomes All Lies Matter inside the visual content of Just Us. I'm going to read from one of the pieces so that you have a sense of what they sound like. And the process was this: I had a conversation with someone. I then wrote down that conversation. After I wrote it down, I hired a psychiatrist specifically for this project. And I took the essay that I had written of the conversation to the psychiatrist, and I I paid her to discuss why I would have said the things that I said, why I felt the way that I felt, and why the white people I was conversing with, or the Black, sometimes it's Black and Latinx people, might also say the things that they said, and what she thought might have motivated them. Once we had that conversation, I then took the essay and rewrote it with that sort of those insights. And then I hired a fact checker, and he and I went through the essay and figured out sort of what the casual comments, how they were in relationship to systemic racism or systems that promoted racism in one way or another, or where the comment had resonance and repetition in the culture at large. And sometimes I just associated out from a line. And so then I brought in the person who might have said, or where I might have read something. So that verso page became the repository for all of the kind of archival, historical, associative material. Once I did that, I then took the essay and I gave it to the person I had the conversation with. And I said to that person, you can, you can read it, and then if there's anything you think didn't go the way I said, I'm happy to change it. But nobody ever said that it wasn't the conversation we had. What people said was, I said those things and you said those things, but what I meant is different from what you're saying, what I meant. And at that point, I then said, okay, can you write a response? And I will include that response. I will not change anything you've written. I will just add it to the essay. So that was sort of the life of each essay. They went through that process. So here's one of the pieces. I go to see Fairview, a play by Jackie Sybil's Jury with a white female friend. She's interested in thinking about whiteness. This play is interested in thinking about race. We are covered in all directions. Near the end of the play, the fourth wall is broken. A character asks the white members of the audience to get up from their seats and walk on the stage, which has been transformed into a beige living and dining room with a staircase leading to the second floor. Faces will be revealed, composure tested. Effort must be made to stay within the requests of the play. The Black actor wishes the space of the audience to hold Black people in a way the world does not. The request is presented as a conditional, what if? What if the audience in this space of the imagination can enact something that doesn't exist in our world? Is the stage now a segregated space as the Black actors join the Blacks in the audience? Has center stage transformed into the front of the bus? Or is it now a whites only boardroom? In the moment, no one knows what really is being proclaimed. A white man in the seat behind me says, "This is fucked up." Nonetheless, he makes his way to the stage. The white woman I am with remains in her seat. I am getting tense. The playwright is a Black woman and I am a Black woman, and I want her play to have what it has requested, what I assume it needs. Is my identification with the playwright because she's Black or because she's a woman or because she's an artist? It's impossible to dissect. My tension begins to couple with a building resentment against my white friend. I feel betrayed by her. I am not the playwright. The playwright might think the success of the play depends on some white people staying in their seat. The playwright might be waiting for a Black person to get on stage with the white people. None do. The playwright might want me to think her request is divisive and walk out of the theater, not a Black stage, not a white stage, but a united stage. The playwright might have calculated what percentage of the audience, white members of the audience, would not comply. Are my unbearable feelings a sign that I, a Black member of the audience, remain inside the play? The playwright might think, why are they listening to me? As more and more white audience members fill up the stage and people of color stay seated. Will the stage hold all the white people? Or, and this is what is troubling me, the playwright might have said exactly what she wants to happen. I am trying to listen to the actor speak the closing lines of the play, which it turns out are composed of quotes from famous Black writers, but all I can think about is my white friend's non-compliant presence in her seat. Why won't she do what she was asked? I can't understand why she can't do such a simple thing. Why can't she see it matters? Does it matter? In the sense that race matters, her refusal feels like an insistence on full ownership of the entire theater. Oh God, I am beginning to feel pushed out of my own seat for the last minutes of the play, burdened by my association with her refusal, a moment of Frenchasman, perhaps. Taxi, I want to run. Away from what? An embodied refusal I can't help but see, and one that surprises me. My own mounting emotion in the face of what I perceive as belligerence. A friendship error despite my understanding of how whiteness functions. I thought we shared the same worldview, if not the same privileges. Be still, my beating, breaking heart. When the play finally ends, I say to my confounding friend, I didn't know you were Black. She doesn't respond. Given the irritation in my voice, it's not a comment seeking a response. It's my performance of my own refusal to engage beyond the terms of the play. Her performance of resistance felt like no solidarity, insofar as I, a Black person, dropped away as the request of the play dropped away. She must understand the play's request is made in response to a world where Black people's requests don't matter. Why doesn't she recognize the moment as an offering of Black feminism? So my friend, I'll just read a little bit of her response and then we can start talking, Terrance. So she's one of the people who were kind enough to write a response. She says, may be of interest to you and important to me. I know I shrink sometimes a lot, sometimes a little from scenes where I'm asked personally or generally to feel bad as a white person, where whatever else is being asked, I'm also being asked to feel shame, guilt, to do penance, to stand corrected, to sit down chastised. Obviously, some of this shrinking is just because who wouldn't? No one enjoys being chastised. Or do they? This is where my reaction becomes important to me. I react with a kind of nausea when I smell, as Daryl Pitney puts it, white audiences who confuse having been chastised with learning. Of course, there are reasons to feel shame, guilt, to be corrected, etc. That is, there is real history and there are real situations and experiences and exchanges that call for them. And some of my reaction to is per who wouldn't, straight up defensive. But situations, claims, blog posts, diversity, workshop, activities, whatever, manufactured specifically to elicit white shame, penance, etc., make me uneasy. I feel like unholy transactions are in the offering, like white moral masochism is getting a thrill. And so it was interesting to me that for her, the play turned into a diversity workshop, that an imaginative ask in a theater where everything is an ask, an imaginative ask, suddenly felt like chastisement because she herself would have to put herself from a seat into a standing position, and suddenly that became too much. So that obviously led to the opening poem of the play, of the book. So why don't I stop there, Terrance?
Ooh, cool. A lot of interesting stuff to talk about. You know, I've read the book, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times. So I obviously have way too many questions for the little block that we have before we open it up.
Oh, no
Well,
way.
I'm gonna very quickly go through some of the things that have sort of have come up. One is just like a kind of, you know, possible personal question. So then when we for the Q&A, if people are hearing these questions or if they're in the neighborhood of some of your questions, maybe we can get to them. But I'm just going to wind up with one real question to launch us off. But first, here are just some of the things that emerged based on reading Just Us. So this idea of trust that emerges. It's there, and it's also in the November film that you recently did. This question of like, is the fundamental problem here about how do we restore trust? There's one question. The second one I had was about just a general conversation that I'd implied to in my bio, which is this evolution from like an American lyric, whatever you think lyric is, and we think lyric is, to this idea of an American conversation. If we call these last 3 books a kind of a trilogy, what does that mean for you to move from this notion of the lyric to the conversation? There's another thing. We had like 5 days. We'll talk about it. Me and you, we can talk about it forever because we're going to be working for 50 years together. But as they hear it, maybe they'll want it to circle back to this. The other one is another really interesting question about like Black studies versus white studies. So the people in the audience who have looked at the book will have a sense of what that means. But it's funny because I think probably white people don't know what that means, and or probably maybe even find it vaguely offensive to think of a notion of like white studies versus the actual presence of Black studies, which for many years was, in the university, in the life of the university, maybe not so much anymore, but there were Black studies departments started by Sonia Sanchez. So there's another question about this notion of that, which is also connected to like, versus like American studies. What does that mean for you? These are thoughts that emerged when I was reading it. The other one is just this question about like mentors versus influences and teaching. So that when you say, part of the book opens with that scene after the poem of you being in that class with the white students, the construction of whiteness, thinking about how important is this role of teacher as a mediator or versus mentor or versus friend. Just thinking about the last part you wrote, the role that you see sort of most useful in trying to articulate these questions. So there's the questions that we ain't gonna get time to get to. Okay. But here's what we're talking. Here's my real question for you. So let's say that everybody accepts what you're saying, that everybody tuning in and everybody that encounters your work says, you're right. There are imbalances, there's privilege, there's absences, there's lacks of trust. So that if the book is going into a world where you sort of meet like the white dude at the airport who's resistant to that, or he's saying, as one of the guys said, I don't see race, which is also a great response to that question. Maybe we could talk about that too. It's very interesting to the one who says, I don't see race. But let's say that the case that you're making meets no resistance. Maybe you don't meet it because it's a person of a certain age sort of identifies very quickly, has come up in a certain way to identify all of these problems very quickly. That might be somebody under 30 of any really background that's lived in America, certainly for the last 4 years, maybe longer. If all that's true, if everybody agrees, then what happens? What do you do? Is it like, what's the course of action? If everybody agrees with what you're saying, if you're not really making an argument, you're making an observation and everybody just nods, what's the course of action?
Well, the course of action is reading. I mean, the book is, to me, is enacting close reading. What does it mean to be in relation to another? Erica Hunt's definition of love as close reading is really important to me and to this book, because I wanted the sections to enact a process. So the book is not about agreement or not agreement or pedagogy or ultimate solutions. It's a book that relies on the ability to live inside a process and to take that, actually to have pleasure in reading and thinking. And it's in the final chapters, if I ask for something, the thing I asked for is that we begin to re-engage each other again. We begin to listen to each other again. That it's sort of like the person at the play, there's already an assumption of chastisement. There's already an assumption that an imaginative ask is an ask that is meaning to hit her over the head in some way, rather than to allow each of us to engage the other of us, and you know, it's a big ask to ask the reader to read without without the satisfaction of getting a thing, a message, a prescription, a coda, a, you know, a how-to moment. But I feel that real readers will find the process and opening into thinking about their own conversations, into thinking, what is it that they want from another when they engage another? What is built between the two of us when we talk to each other? And certainly cross-race, there are stumbling blocks that this book in particular is interested in engaging and butterflying out in terms of our historical positioning. But that would be my answer to that. So it, in a way, it comes back to this notion of trust, you know, that
Certainly.
Can we trust each other again to be in good faith in the act of conversation?
Right. The reason one of those questions is about like mentor versus teacher versus friend is because when you say close reading, I put that almost in this zone, but I also hear next to that another word that comes up that maybe we'll tease out a little bit here is like intimacy. Is really what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about it in terms of close reading, it puts me back into the zone that there is an implied kind of, there is a power dynamic because you're deciding, you being like the person in charge, not you in particular, but you on this side of the question though, of like close reading says who decides what's going to be read. You see what I mean? Like they're still at that teacher dynamic. So I'm wondering, digging down into that, like what's the relationship between like your notion of intimacy as it emerges in the book with this notion of close reading?
Well, intimacy, I mean, I think intimacy is what gets built or not built between two people in conversation. And so, and I don't imagine, I mean, maybe other people have other ideas about what happened in conversation, but my idea about conversation, if, you know, like Terrance, between, let's say you and I, that I would learn from you things I don't know. And the things I learn might be the things you tell me, and it also might be how you tell me. And it might be a curiosity about your positionality in the world and your view of a thing. And then I would carry that with me so that the next time I see you, I might use one word versus another word. I might sit on your right side versus your left side because I learned that your hearing is better on your right side. You know, so that's what I mean. I would come closer to you because I have learned some stuff from you or about you or with you or alongside you. And that becomes the close reading of it. And that's one of the reasons why this book moves from lyric to, because the lyric traditionally is considered an interior activity. It's driven by the first person, it is the I, whereas the essay is in itself a conversation between the writer and the subject and the reader. And so, and because the culture of whiteness informs all our lives as Americans, it then is an American endeavor, you know, whether it's the lyric or the conversation. It's still inside the umbrella of this culture where we are trying now to depose a white nationalist from the White House.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was going to go next. I also have to say, I see like people trying to get questions in here. Now they need to wait their turn. I see some question about the reference of love when we talk about close reading. So we'll save that one for later. But I do want to talk to you about the very present moment, this very important week that we're in. And I'm just still trying to line it up with what we're here talking about. Like, does your sense of the urgency or the audience in the book, does the way you talk about this book change given the way things played out this week, given that it wasn't a landslide, given, I mean, we knew a lot of the things that were going to happen. So I just wonder, have you done any recalibrations or any other kinds of thinking just based on this?
But based on this book? Yeah. I mean, if I were in the position to believe that the events of the summer, COVID, the quarantine, the killing of George Floyd, the protests had moved us forward as a country, the results, the closeness of this election makes me understand that these issues are as alive and as present as they were a year ago when I wrote this book. You know, I mean, you know, as I've spoken to many people in the last few days, and even though everyone is happy that it seems like Biden-Harris will, you know, take the day, it's still a little shocking that it's taking what it's taken, you know, that it is as close as it is, that that Mitch McConnell has been reelected in the Senate, that, you know, all of this thing. So it means that our neighbors, some of our colleagues, people we are encountering every day hold the views of our sitting president.
Mm-hmm. The question is though, like, I mean, so would you have been surprised if it was a landslide? You know, the opposite side of that question, or because you know the kind of.
Would I have been surprised? Yeah, I would have been surprised.
You would have been surprised. I was hoping for it. I thought that it might be. You know, I guess I'm. You know, well, I was thinking like.
But if you look at who voted for Obama, for example, Obama was in power for 2 years, for 2 terms, 8 years, 2 terms. The numbers are, I put them in Just Us because people keep saying, how do people who voted for Obama end up voting for, but you know, white people voted, only 43% of white people voted for Obama when he ran against McCain. And then when he ran against Romney, it went down to 39. So if 39% of white people, including white women and white men who voted for Obama, that meant 59, almost 60% of white people in this population did not vote for him, did not support him. And in the first term, 55% did not vote for him, did not support him. So we're seeing that same split in the country now, that white people have remained consistent in their anti-Blackness, their anti-immigration, their anti-Muslim, you know, all of it, anti-Palestine, anti-Semitism, you just name it, they got it. And obviously that's not every white person, and there are white people who are anti-racist, but this is a real thing. You know, I've had so many people say to me, are you done writing about race now? Are you done? Are you finished? Have you had enough of that? And and my response to that is, I'll be done when we get that landslide.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's optimism.
Or it's blinders.
Say again?
Or it's walking around the world with blinders on.
Yeah, optimism. That's what that does. It keeps you focused too. I think we got just a couple more minutes here, so I'll try to like peel one of those questions that I sort of set up at the end before we open it up for other people to talk.
Mm-hmm.
One of the really interesting things about Just Us, I think, is, well, we could start with Citizen, like the way that you sort of it wasn't like race wasn't there before, but just in the last few years, if you think about like what Fred Moten's work, this notion of fugitivity of the Black and blur, consent to not consent, or Cedia Hartman's The Wayward Lives, the notion of Black leisure, women and leisure as a kind of resistance. And you already said Wilkinson's Afro-pessimism. So all of that, this notion of, like, as I said before, what does it mean to study Blackness, to look at that Blackness and all of its complexity? Well, one of the interesting things that I think you're doing, again, is introducing this idea of also studying whiteness. So I guess I'm wondering about, like, as I said before, like, is there some middle ground about, like, America? What does it mean to have, like, these very focused, separate ideas? Or is there some middle ground about what that adds up to? Does that add up to a kind of American studies? Because I'm thinking about one particular kind of work that has a kind of history. And as I said, this sort of, what seems to me a new and interesting notion of a different sort of study, the construction of whiteness, if you follow what I'm saying.
Exactly. And for me, I think we have had some people who, like Toni Morrison, for example, who has said, she doesn't need to turn the gaze on white people, that everybody has turned the gaze on white people. But the way the gaze was turned on whiteness was to normalize it, to say that it's just there, rather than to look at it as something that has been weaponized against Black people. And so I think what we have inadvertently managed in this culture is to talk about Blackness and racism, and yet have people believe it has nothing to do with ordinary white people. Teju Cole talks about in the White Savior Industrial Complex essay that he wrote, talks about racism without racists. And I can see how we got there. We have these texts. I mean, the major exception for me would be James Baldwin, who has always had whiteness as part of his investigation, line of inquiry work. But I think you often hear white people able to say things like, I'm an ally to Black people. Not the way this country works is not acceptable to me. It's more the way this country works is acceptable to me, but I understand it's not acceptable to Black people, so I'll help them. But it should actually be unacceptable to white people as well. I mean, white people should understand that the culture of whiteness it's foundationally based on white supremacy, which means if you are not working against that, you are in collusion with it. And that's what we've seen in the Senate, for example, and that's what Trump is relying on in the Supreme Court now. So, so I think it's, in order to get a full picture of what this dynamic is, I think we need to start bringing forward the reality of the weaponization of elements of white culture against white people and Black people and Latinx people and Asian people, and Muslim people and all kinds of people who live in this country. We can't just continue pretending that there is a benevolence of whiteness that somehow stops itself when we get to Southern, and only begins when we get to the South with McConnell. It is everywhere. And so that was my intent in shifting the lens.
So many questions, but I know other people have other things that they're going to want to ask. So I feel like I should open it up right about now. But yeah, there's so much in it that we'll talk about when I take you out for coffee here. Hi, Terrance. First question from the audience is from NYU student Tia Matthews. From your accumulative experience, research, and writing, what is justice, Claudia?
What is justice? Well, you know, Cornel West says justice is how love shows itself in public. And that's a way of talking about equity in the world. You can't make people like you. That should not be something that we want or are invested in. But we should be able to feel free in our movements without being racially profiled, without being shot in the back, without being shot in our beds at home. That, you know, that's the reality of Black people in this country. So, and also the justice system that criminalizes every Black person from the age of 2 on, maybe from the age, not even from any age, just Black person in general. I just read this article by Nina Lahani in which she says researchers reviewed 1.8 million hospital birth records in Florida from 1992 to 2015 and established the race of the doctor in charge of each newborn's care. When cared for by white doctors, Black babies are about 3 times more likely to die in the hospital than white newborns. This disparity halves when Black babies are cared for by a Black doctor. And that is racism. Those doctors, if you said, are you racist? They'd be like, no, I took an oath. And yet their disregard, their inability to value Black people leads to that statistics, 3 times more likely to die when the attending physician is Black. So it's, you know.
The opposite of injustice, that's what it is.
Yeah, so it's the opposite of just, well, that would be the most direct answer.
So I know we're gonna have some more questions coming in here, but I also have like the students, your students, they're here too. So I'm gonna see something coming up and read this while I say to my students sitting here, y'all shout me an answer because you got the luckiness because you're in the room. Or I could turn the camera to you too. So I'm gonna read this question and then y'all think if you wanna ask a question. So here's the next one. Another question from Grace Toy. What are your thoughts on Asian Americans being the 2nd highest population to support Biden-Harris in this election and our middle role in advancing racial justice? How can Kamala Harris be a role model for furthering Black-Asian relations? Thank you.
Well, first of all, we don't know really I hope that's true, that Asian Americans are the biggest population supporting him. And that, you know, that probably is true because they were also a big demographic in support of Obama, Asian Americans. I mean, at times even higher than Latin Americans, I believe. So, so that is fantastic. And I think one of the reasons for that is that Asian people are subjected to some of the same racism from white people and white supremacists that Black people are. Not the shooting and killing, but the same kind of microaggressions, the same kinds of assumptions about Asians taking things from white people, that despite the fact that we're all citizens, that somehow white people own everything, and if Black people or Asian people or Latinx people have something, we've taken it from white people rather than we are all here. So I think that might account for, I mean, I think Asian people can see, you know, Kathy Park Han's new book is really fantastic in the way in which she delves into that as well. Where Blacks and Asians cross and then where they don't. In terms of Kamala Harris, what can she, I mean, I think what she can do is what she's doing. I mean, she's the first woman, the first Asian Black woman in the highest office in this country. Just that visual by itself does what Obama's presidency also did. It's the shattering of the glass ceiling that heretofore was only held by white men. And so I think I don't know what she will do, how conservative or liberal going forward she will be, but I do know that her very presence has already shifted what is possible in our imagination.
Let me slip a question in here around that kind of question. I feel like underneath that question is also getting at, if we are thinking about like Black-white dynamics, given the makeup of the country, there'll always be a question of, where do Native Americans fit? Where do queer people fit? Where do any other kind of person that's not securely in this like Black-white paradigm? So the question I ask you is like, do you think what you're proposing is like, is it transferable, right? Is there some spectrum where a lot of what you're talking about is sort of metaphor for how any person, anybody should be thinking about a relationship to power? Maybe that was a statement, is a question, I guess, about how do you answer that question about like the notion of it, is it just about Black women and white men? Is that the equation we're looking at here? Is there some way that's transferable or metaphorical?
I think it's metaphorical across. I mean, I think when I think about Black people, I really am thinking about all marginalized people. So Native Americans, Asian Americans, apparently not Cuban Americans, given that they supported Trump. So they obviously feel empowered in a different kind of way through that alliance. But I do use the Black-white dichotomy in the sense of Blackness as an umbrella term for people who are kicked out of the power dynamic and the power hold of whiteness.
Y'all got any questions y'all want to throw in here before we move on to the next one? Okay, we have chat. I'm gonna turn it. We got a question from one of our students, or you want to ask it? You just want to ask it? Okay, they're just gonna ask the question, and I'm gonna repeat it.
I'm listening. I'm listening closely.
Okay.
And we all were talking earlier about how do we rebuild trust through conversation. But this word rebuild, it seems to me that in this country, there's no being that the country is built on what it's built on, enslavement, genocide, stealing everything. Like, it's not so much, it doesn't seem to me so much a matter of rebuilding trust as like creating trust out of like what, there's no template. How do we make trust when there's not a template for trust?
Good question. Do you hear that? How do we?
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that creating trust might be closer to this idea. I want to read you this this quote by Frantz Fanon, which might be of interest. He says, "As soon as I desire, I'm asking to be considered. I am not merely here and now, sealed into thingness. I am for somewhere else and for something else. I demand that notice be taken of my negating activity insofar as I pursue something other than life, insofar as I do battle for the creation of a human world. That is a world of reciprocal recognitions." And so one of the reasons why I little bit think of it as rebuild is because I think, like all of the research shows that children initially don't make distinctions until they are taught to make those distinctions. And they're taught very early, but initially everybody's possible for them. And then they are inside the culture of whiteness and begin to understand that Black people are not valued, that the power resides with white people, that white people are more valued, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they begin to make decisions about how they will metabolize that and act in relation to it. But in terms of building intimacy with another person, creating that intimacy, I think in the project of the humanness of us, that possibility was there initially and then taken away once this culture took over. And then we would have to rebuild it again. We would have to see another person as human again.
Yeah, cool. Another question from Rachel Kaufman. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us tonight, Professor Rankine, exclamation point. I was wondering if you might be able to speak to your interest in and inclusion of visual art / imagery in your poetry or in specific projects. As you developed your craft, was there a moment when you realized it could or needed to be both?
Well, I think the minute I realize I'm interested in people, their entire emotional life, their entire interior life, I was interested in building on the page something that engaged us, not just visually, not just text-based, but also visually, that created a juxtapositioning between the text and the image so that an opening was created there for the reader to either reside in a kind of associated bounce between the two things, or to go where the image took them and then come back to the text. And I love the freedom of that. I love that I couldn't police that I have absolutely no idea how one would associate to an image that I include in a text, even as I'm thinking, oh, the relationship is this, but I don't know that you will see that. And so that is exciting to me. What else can be created in this? So I really love the sort of the collaging of different genres and images. I mean, if I could bring in music somehow, I would, you know, to the layers that, and I don't expect that every image will have the same impact on every person, but I feel like some readers will be able to go here and there with it, and other readers will just turn the page, but that's okay.
I think that work is kind of a metaphor for the philosophy. There's also implications of the optimism in the work that you're doing, which is to say a conversation across genres, a collaboration across genres, across material, and suggesting that the same thing is possible across bodies as well, and across history. There's a way that even when things don't look alike and when they don't seem like they're in harmony, there is a way to put them next to each other and create some kind of new conversation. So I thought that in the work that your practice is a reflection of your philosophy, I think, about mixing these different modes and mediums. Here's another question from Sharif. Sharif, I can't remember how to say your last name, Shahana, but I know you're an amazing poet. Sharif, yeah, Shahana.
Hi, Sharif.
You know Sharif too. Sharif's a good poet.
Yeah.
Hi, Claudia. In your life and work, are you able to find a balance between the challenges of anti-racist work and self-preservation? Or are they, for you, separate? Good question, Sharif. You hear that question?
Yeah, anti-racist work. And what was the second thing?
It's about self-preservation, like what is the toll of this kind of work? But the question is, in your life and work, are you able to find a balance between the challenge of anti-racist work and self-preservation? Or, you know, are they separate for you, or are they, they linked?
You know, I have to say, Sharif, that I know that the subject is anti-racism or racism or however you want to look at it. But for me, the subject is just the reality. Like, what does it mean to live in the United States? Like, and, you know, if my name was T.S. Eliot, I would be writing the same thing, you know, because it is a way to say, this is what I see. This is the reality I'm living. And so I don't really see that as anti-racist specifically. I see it as creative work that is taking on the realities that I am encountering. And in as much as that's what it is, the making of it actually gives me pleasure. It's because one is answering lines of inquiry in the work, thinking about how erasure moves through both literally and metaphorically. How can I bring the activity of the erasure into the dialogue of the book? And, so these are just craft questions, structural questions that that all poets spend a lot of time thinking about, and one assumes they're thinking about it because it brings them some kind of satisfaction, some kind of sense of achievement, some kind of pleasure to actually get it down, to get it done.
Yeah, I think of that as being related to that previous question. It's just like they're united by kind of problem solving for anti-racism, solving for self-preservation, solving for creating something by mixed media. So it's united by that desire to, just like the pleasure comes out of working on a problem. Maybe you ain't solving, you're working on a problem.
Yeah, working on it.
Direction of that.
I wish just writing a book was a solving mechanism.
Yeah. Right. Is there another question coming here? How y'all doing over there? Everybody good?
I have a follow-up, I think, to Christian.
Okay, sure. Can you hear this question coming for you?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in the idea of conversations as sort of a trust building or trust creating exercise. But I keep thinking that in order to have those conversations, you have to have consenting and willing participants. So I feel like specifically surrounding this election, there have been a lot of people who simply don't want to engage in conversation. And I think especially white people who sort of don't want to talk about it or want to keep it private. And so what do you do when you cannot have a conversation? What do you do with individuals who are sort of unwilling to engage?
I don't engage.
Portion of our country.
Well, I think this idea that anybody should force anybody to talk to them, I'm not interested in bullying people into conversing with me. I'm interested, the conversations in Just Us came about because these are people I talk to. And the investigation of where these conversations felt unbearable to me, or like too much, or became questions that I wanted to pursue, happened in the normal course of those conversations. If I approached somebody, a stranger that I didn't know, that I wasn't in the habit of conversing with because I didn't know them, if we got to a moment where the conversation stopped, it stopped. I wasn't going to then push it into, like I was waiting for a flight once for Southwest. A man comes up to me, he says, because Southwest, they give you those numbers. And he says to me, are you number 10 or something? I don't know, something like that. Oh, he said, I'm number 8, so I don't want to get in front of you. What's your number? And I said, I'm 10, so go ahead and get in front of me. And then we were talking and he says, I love being on airplanes. I love not having to listen to the news. I hate all of this news all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you shouldn't have voted for him. And he turned to me and his entire demeanor changed. And he said, it's not just him. And that was the end of our conversation. There was no going forward after that. He didn't want to talk anymore. I said, it's not just him, but you shouldn't have voted for him. And that was it. And so that ended right there. And that was that. But in the book, you'll see other conversations went on, but they might not go in the direction I care to go in. And then you stop. I don't, it's not, it's not our responsibility to change the consciousness of other people. I don't think we can. I think trauma changes people sometimes, but I don't think anybody else can change someone else. I think you can respect other people, but they are, they're responsible for change within themselves. So that shouldn't be your endeavor. I think your endeavor should be to talk to those people who wish to talk to you so that you can find other productive ways to engage the issues you want to engage.
Okay, we have another question coming here. I feel like I'm almost like the mediator instead of the host because I keep on add a little seasoning to everything. I still think it's this question of like people, like, do we even like people? I don't think we like people in general. It's individual relationships. So you're trying to initiate, like, trying to see these people as individuals. You're trying to see a person, but sometimes they want to retreat back into this notion of peopledom. So that's kind of how I think about that story that you recount, trying to see people. Anyway, whatever. So here's the last question that we're going to use to wrap it up. I hope y'all can hear what I'm saying here. From Tanaja Jordan, this has been a year where inspiration and ebbed and flowed. What have you read this year that has kept you inspired? What has enabled you to keep writing regularly? So I'm seeing that that's supposed to be the wrap-up question. The great thing about Zoom is we really can go to midnight if we want to, but I guess we should.
But people have to go back and see what's happening.
Yeah, they do. They do. We're gonna wait to midnight so we get a clear answer. But
I don't think we're gonna hear anything today. I think it'll be tomorrow. What have I been reading? Well, lots of stuff actually. Kathy Park Hong, I mentioned. I'm at my desk. I'm looking at a pile of books. Let's see what they are. I just finished reading The Force of Nonviolence by Judith Butler. Kevin Young came out with a collection of poems, African American poetry, 250 years. Christine Hume has a new book out that I recommend called The Saturation Project. I'm reading also Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, because Saidiya Hartman wrote this amazing essay off of an event in this book. And then I thought, oh, I should really go back to that. So those are some of the things. I just read Thick by Tessie Cotton. I read I saw a poem online by Jericho, so I went back and I read The Tradition because I was thinking, I don't remember that poem. So I went back to find it. So that's just what's sitting. Oh, I'm also reading Latinx by Ed Morales, because that conversation in Just Us, that's what I mean. The conversation with the person around Latinx politics and issues of identity in the United States made me realize how much I didn't know about that. And so it completely changed my reading. So maybe without that conversation, I would have seen this book and not bought it. But then I saw it and I bought it and it's actually really interesting. So I think, so that's a random.
Your answers, I'm reading everything.
I'm rereading, I'm reading,
Broadly and closely. I mean, we can do a loop like that. Like the question about reading, that little modifier on reading about reading closely and the implications of reading closely is really what we've been talking about. Yeah, so I think that actually is a good place to kind of bring us to some kind of conclusion here about what it is we're trying to do and where we're going.
Close reading.
So yeah, I mean, they didn't tell me how to close this thing out. I'm like I said, we will.
You say good night, Terrance. You say good night.
What's that? Okay, good. You say good night. And go see what's happening in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for coming. It looks like there are a lot of listeners. Your work is so important to us. It gives us so much to think about and talk about. I'm so glad you're going to be here at NYU bringing that work for us. And everybody, all the places that you like, where you sit right now, they'll still get to read the books. So I don't feel bad for the people who are losing you as we gain you, because they'll read your books. So thank you, and holler at me when you get here so we can go get some coffee.
All right, I'm looking forward to that. I'm gonna hold you to it. All right, thank you, everyone. Good night. I hope we get some news.
Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.